Well, today is going to be Wednesday, all day long till midnight, as they say. But anyway, I want to tell you something. This is Michael DeSilva, Uncle Mike. I want to tell you that, you have to trust people. If people do sin against you, you can choose to trust them or choose not to retrust them again. But hopefully if you know that person, you know their heart. Don't always think the worst of them, because parents often do that, and never will trust them because they think, well, once they get a mind president, they don't want to trust that person ever again. Also, it could be the way they were raised by their parents that made them have that kind of ideal, because they were raised in a distrusting atmosphere and family environment. So that's why a lot of times they're hard on other people, because their family was hard on them growing up, and that's why they got the same pattern of precedent of behavior. So, a lot of times when we trust people, part of forgiveness is trust. We have to reestablish that trust. That's that's what reconciliation means. It doesn't mean you just forgive and that stops from there. If you know the person, you know who they are, I think the situation's different, as opposed to, say, a stranger doing this to you. You're doing something bad to you. But if someone that you know as a family member, and how you feel how they are in spite of what happened, you can trust them again and allow them to come back over a certain amount of time. And that's what the marksmanship of what a real Christian really does as far as acts of forgiveness. And a lot of times we forgive, and that's where we stop. And we say we forgive, but that's really all it goes, is just words and nothing more. And like I always say, actions always speak louder than words, or they are volumes. Because when we say forgiveness and then we talk about it around town, we talk about it, in other places, and we talk about it with our friends, that's not really forgiveness. That's just kind of bringing it up and kind of gossiping all about in town about it. And that's not the way we should be, with the people who've done us wrong. If we have something against them, we should go to them and talk about it. We should go before the Lord and petition our requests and queries, not gossip about it. We should go to that person and talk to them about it, directly, not go behind their back and circumvent it all around town, or talk about it in the stores and so forth, because that's not really being a Christian ourselves. We're just as sinful as the sin that was done to us in that case, because we really basically are doing the same thing all over again. We're like, we've forgiven the person, then why do we act like we haven't forgiven the person? When we do things like that, that shows that we haven't. And if we really are forgiving people, we don't do stuff like that, And it doesn't matter what it is, because, we have to know in our heart, and it's up to the person to want to do trust again, or whether or not to, because trust is a hard thing for a lot of people, and a hard time. Some people that have trouble with dealing with trust too can also be a hard thing. So, you have to kind of, really realize that, because trust is an issue for a lot of people, because they've had a lot of issues with trust with their family members or with past situations, and the way they were raised has a lot to do with that type of stuff. And it's like, if you're a real Christian and you really love a person, you will eventually trust them back again, because forgiveness coincides with trust. Forgiveness is also part of obedience unto the Lord. If the Lord can forgive you for anything, then we should be able to, in time, be able to do that to our fellow brothers and sisters. Now, an example would be, which is really true. A brother brought up to me, if someone borrowed $10,000, would you trust them again to give them $10,000 if they didn't pay you back the first time? Well, the answer is no, because they would just do it again. But I don't think this applies to all situations. But like I said, you have to use choice. And what's in your heart, go by what God tells you. The world may say, don't forgive him. You don't trust him again. But what does God say? Or don't forgive her, don't trust her again. But what does the Lord say about that? Don't trust your child again. What does the Lord say about that? We all are sinners. We're born into sin. Our souls are not sinful, but we're born into it. And that's why we are in a sinful world, as a result of how we were born into it. So we have to approach things like that. When we hate the sin, we don't hate the sinner. Many times we do hate the sinner too, along with the sin, like I talked about. A lot of this about forgiveness, because many people have a hard time understanding it. And most people don't even understand the full scope of how Jesus was teaching it in the Bible in the first place. That's why a lot of people have issues with trust and re-bringing someone back. The reconciliation part, what the Bible does speak about and teach about. How we bring people back into our life, into our family, from a period of time of being apart. What would be the new parameters? What would be discussed? What would be the guidelines? If there is, there's family things going on, like if there's, maybe somebody likes someone, now that's a different time. Would you allow them to see each other? Would you allow them to be together? If that's the issue, because that maybe have a lot to do with the trust issue, because you feel that in your mind that you don't want them to see them, because in your mind you're stone cold against that, because maybe there's an age difference, a huge age difference. But maybe if you think about it through God's eyes, maybe the age difference doesn't really matter. And maybe it doesn't. In His eyes it doesn't. And maybe what you're seeing is through the eyes of the world. But when we look through the eyes of Christ, when the time comes, that age difference isn't going to really matter at one hill of beans.
Battery level is 50%.
That's what we have to look at, And there's other factors, Why have you not retrusted this person, rededicated this person back? If they're a Christian believer and they're repentant, like you go around telling everybody in town and they know Jesus, why haven't you forgave that person and brought them fully back then? Because that's the question when you say all this stuff. When people go around saying this, that's, really what people normally do. But, you're against the fact that you don't want, maybe the people to be involved, and that's why you haven't brought them back. And that's why you have trust issues, because you're trying to play God instead of allowing God to work through this situation and through your family members and through the person who they have an interest in. So you have to look at things. I mean, parents often will always do that because they want to be the protector, and that's normally by default what they do. But then there's other roles too, on that too. I mean, if you know the person, you know the heart, and they wouldn't harm, your child, and they wouldn't bring any harm to that child later on when they do get into a relationship, then there really is no reason to allow them not to be together at the right time. I wouldn't say for them to be together now, but later on they can be together, when they get older. There's no reason to say no. But now, definitely. But, to say that they can't see that person forever is sort of wrong to do, because if that person really loves that person, they're going to see that person no matter what you do. And you're just going to have to either change your ways, or you're going to have to accept it. And hopefully you will accept it, because they're going to fight you tooth and nail if they're strong-willed. Because if they got a strong will, they're going to see that person no matter what, because they love that person. And it's just like you love your husband or you love your wife, or you have that strong will to be with them, well, they do too. Where do they get that? It's a genetically trait from you. And if they are like that, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you fight them tooth and nail, they're just going to make it more and more. They're just going to go do it more and more, because you keep fighting them every step of the way. So they're just going to rebel more and more. So, the point that I'm saying is, let God be in it. Don't try to force things on, the person who's involved. Just be a parent, look out for them, guide them. But, when it comes to love, let God do that. In time, if it's meant for them to be together, they will be together. But if you're trying to fight it every step of the way, you're going to have problems. Because the reason why those problems are coming up, because maybe God wants them to be together later on. And you're intervening with something that God is trying to put together. Because that's why this person still is crazy or is in love with this person, because they want to really be with them one day. And there's nothing wrong with that when the right time comes. Remember, age is just a number. And really, when they get to be an adult That's really what it is. And that's really the truth. So, everybody says, ooh, that's crazy. Ooh, because that's the world. But, what does the Bible say? The Bible is a lot different. What does God say about that? Age is just the numbers, what it says. So, you see a lot of those examples of Rachel and Esther and, those are just a couple, but those people were way apart in years and age. And even when they got to be an adult, even at legal age, they still loved each other, and they still really wanted and longing to be with each other, and they were together, and they were married, and they had children, and they were really blessed. So, you need to think about it. It's not like the person wants to be with that person that way now. So even if you brought them back, and you brought that person back into your home, whoever it is, it's a girl or a guy, and you brought them back, they're not going to do nothing to that child. You don't have nothing to worry about. That's just your fear, and you just getting paranoid because the parents do that, and there's no reason to have all this extra stuff out because it's not necessary, because they know what happened, they know why you're that way, and they're not going to do that because out of love and respect for you, but also out of love and respect for the person that they care about, who they're in love with. They're not going to do that because they really love that person and they really love you as their parents, and they don't hate you and don't have nothing against you. So you might want to rethink this. This is Michael DeSilva from New Hunter Church of Christ. I hope this helps people in the quest of forgiveness and in relationships. Take care.